Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. We're always talking about ways to level up your life, right? And today we're diving into a topic that's absolutely key for that. We're going to be talking about habit tracking and taking it even a step further with dedicated journals. These journals, they can be like a secret weapon for building those consistent habits and reaching those goals you have. And we're not just talking theory here. We're going to be looking at some specific examples, especially these Listallion journals that so many of you are probably already familiar with. And by the end of this, you're going to have all the intel you need to start tracking like a pro and really see those changes you're looking for.
You hit the nail on the head. Like, so many people have these big dreams and ambitions, but then those daily actions, they just kind of fizzle out. So what we're diving into is how to bridge that gap using some really cool tools and strategies.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because habit tracking might seem like kind of a basic thing, right? Just marking off what you did each day. But we're actually going to go way deeper than that. We're going to talk about why it's so powerful and how these dedicated journals especially can help you make it a real, like a transformative part of your life.
And one of the things that really drew me to this topic is that there's this quote from the material that calls a habit tracking notebook the ultimate tool for transformation. And at first, that sounds like, wow, that's a pretty bold statement. But the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. It's not just about writing things down, it's about the mindset shift that happens when you start consciously tracking your habits.
It's almost like once you start tracking those intentions, they become like real actions, and you can see how those actions over time, they add up to those big changes you want.
Exactly. And this stuff we're looking at, it highlights how habit tracking, it can be a game changer in a few key ways, right? It helps you get organized with your goals. You're not just floating around with these ideas in your head, you're actually putting them down on paper, turning those big goals into those daily bite-sized actions. And then there's the power of those little wins, each day when we can check off something you did. It sounds small, but it can be incredibly motivating, and it keeps that momentum going.
Oh, for sure. And for me, one of the biggest benefits is just that awareness you get. You start to see, oh, this is what I actually do every day. Not what I think I do or what I wish I did, but what actually happens.
Oh, absolutely. It's about turning those subjective feelings into objective data. You get real insights into your habits and your patterns. And then from that foundation, you can set these really realistic and measurable goals for yourself, grounded in actual self-awareness. And this source material, it talks about celebrating even those small milestones, right? And it's not just because it feels good, although it does feel good to check things off your list, but it's also because it creates this positive feedback loop in your brain, making it way more likely that you'll stick with those habits long term. It's like each little check mark you make, each habit you track, it's like a small piece of evidence that's reinforcing that identity you're trying to build.
I love that. It's like building up that evidence day by day. Okay, so now let's talk about these Listallion journals that you mentioned earlier, because, a lot of our listeners are always asking about the best tools for habit tracking, and these journals, they always seem to come up. So what is it about these Listallion journals that makes them so well suited for this practice?
Well, first of all, they're just beautiful objects.
Right.
I mean, you can tell that a lot of thought went into the design and the quality. They have 211 pages of this nice, thick 120 GSM paper, which means it's really smooth to write on, and you don't have to worry about any bleed through. And that's a big deal because when you're using a journal every day, it needs to be a pleasant experience. It needs to feel good in your hand.
And the covers, too. They come in these really nice faux leather covers, and they just feel so durable. Like, this journal is going to last. They come in these beautiful colors, too, like that really striking ash gray black and a warm cocoa brown, even a bold, proactive purple.
Yeah, exactly. And, having that choice, having those different color options, it makes it feel more personal. But beyond just the aesthetics, there are a bunch of features in these journals that are specifically great for habit tracking. For example, they have dashed lined pages.
Okay, now I have to ask, why dashed lines? Why are they so much better than, say, solid lines or blank pages when it comes to tracking habits?
Oh, that's a great question. Dashed lines, they provide a structure without being overly rigid. They give you enough guidance to create these really clean and organized layouts for your habit trackers, whether you're drawing out weekly grids, monthly calendars, whatever works best for you. They help you keep those lines straight and your sections uniform, which just makes the whole thing look So much more visually appealing and easier to read. And unlike solid lines, they still give you the flexibility to customize your layout however you want. And they've also thought of like little details that really matter, like they have a back pocket where you can store those little notes or reminders.
It's like they really sat down and thought about all the little things that make a difference, you know?
Mhm.
Okay, so we've talked about the why, and we talked about the tools, but now let's talk about those challenges.
Yeah.
Because we all know building new habits, it's not always easy. Our sources actually talk about some really common pitfalls that people run into when they're trying to establish new routines.
Yeah, they do. And it's so interesting because they really pinpoint those like universal struggles. The first one is just plain old inconsistency. We all know this one. You start off super motivated, you're tracking everything, you're on fire, but then life happens and you miss a day or two, and then it's like the whole thing falls apart.
Been there, done that. Ugh. Okay, so what's the next one?
The second challenge is a lack of direction. It's like, you want to improve, but you're not really sure where to start or how to track your progress in a meaningful way.
I can see how that would be a recipe for feeling lost, for sure.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's the overwhelm factor, right? We try to do too much at once. We set all these ambitious goals. We're tracking a million different things, and then we just burn out and give up.
That's a real danger. So how can a structured journal, especially one like the Listallion that we've been talking about, help us navigate these common challenges?
Well, having that dedicated physical space for your habit tracking, it acts as a constant visual reminder. It's right there in front of you. So you're less likely to forget about it. And because you can customize those habit logs, you can actually choose your starting point. You can decide how much you want to track, what metrics you want to use. And that really helps to avoid both that lack of direction and that feeling of being overwhelmed. It's about making it manageable. And just the act of regularly engaging with that journal, like physically writing in it reinforces that commitment you've made to yourself.
So when you say customizable habit logs, what does that actually look like in practice? Like, what are some examples of how someone might personalize their journal for different habits?
Well, you can decide which habits are most important to you right now. Do you want to focus on your morning routine, your productivity, your fitness goals, whatever it is? And then you can decide how often you want to track each habit. Is it a daily thing, a weekly thing, or something else? And then what kind of information do you want to capture? For some habits, it might be a simple yes or no, like did I exercise today? Yes or no. But for other habits, you might want to track the duration, the intensity, maybe how you felt before, during, or after you did it. The beauty of a journal is that it can adapt to you. You're not stuck with a pre-designed template.
And we talked about those dashed lines earlier. They also play a role in visual tracking, right? Like using grids, charts, or symbols to represent your progress. How does that work?
Yeah, visual tracking can be incredibly powerful because our brains are wired to process visual information so quickly. When you see a visual representation of your progress, like a line going up on a graph or a bunch of boxes that are checked off, it gives you that immediate, like visceral feedback.
Yeah.
And the dashed lines in the Listallion journal, they make it so easy to create those visual elements. You can make those straight lines, even boxes. And it just looks so much cleaner and more satisfying. And then when you look back at your progress, it's easy to see those patterns and those trends at a glance.
And this source material, it also emphasizes the importance of reflection, right?
Yeah.
Like having a space in your journal to actually think about why you're tracking these habits, how it's going, what's working, what's not.
Exactly. That reflection piece, it's where the real magic happens. It's where you move beyond just checking boxes and you start to understand yourself better. You start to identify your triggers, your obstacles, the things that really motivate you. And the Listallion journals, they have plenty of space for you to do that, to really dive into those reflections without feeling limited.
It's like having that conversation with yourself, on paper. And then that table of contents we were talking about, that makes it easy to go back and revisit those reflections, see how your thinking has changed over time.
It's like documenting your own personal growth journey. Okay, now I know you have a story about how you used a Listallion journal for your writing. You were talking about it earlier.
Oh, yeah, totally. So I was trying to be more consistent with my writing, but I'd have these bursts of productivity. I'd write like crazy for a few days, and then weeks would go by where I wouldn't even touch my manuscript. I tried all sorts of things, like setting digital reminders, using apps, but nothing seemed to stick. And then I thought, okay, maybe I need to go old school. So I got myself a Listallion journal, and I started writing down my daily word count goal in it. And then I would just track my progress each day, even if it was just a tiny amount. And what I found was the act of physically writing it down, it created this different kind of commitment. And I don't know, maybe it's weird, but even the feel of the paper, it just made the whole experience more enjoyable. Seeing those pages gradually fill up, it was a visual reminder of my progress, and it was really motivating.
You know, it's funny how those seemingly little things, like the quality of the paper, can make such a big difference. And that's one of the things I love about the Listallion journals. They didn't just focus on the functionality, they also paid attention to the user experience. And in your case, it sounds like that definitely contributed to your success.
Absolutely. And thinking back on why that journal worked so well for me, it was partly because the paper, it was just so nice to write on. And that sturdy cover, I could take it anywhere with me, throw it in my bag without worrying about it getting damaged. It made it so easy to just make it a part of my daily routine.
Removing those little friction points, right? Like if the paper's flimsy or the cover's flimsy, it's just one more excuse not to use it. But when you have a journal that feels good to use, that's well made, it makes the whole process more enjoyable. And that enjoyment, it feeds into that consistency.
Totally. You know what else? I was talking to my sister-in-law, and she was telling me how she was trying to build a bunch of healthy habits all at once. She was like, I want to drink more water, take more breaks from my computer, get more exercise. And she was trying to keep track of it all in her head, which, wasn't working so well.
It's like trying to juggle a million things at once.
Yeah.
Right? And your brain, I can only handle so much.
Right, exactly. And then she started using a Listallion journal. I think she went with the soft cover in that cocoa brown color, and it made a huge difference for her. She loved having that dedicated space to list out her habits and track her progress each day. And those dashed lines, again, they came in handy. She used them to create this really clear visual layout for the week so she could see everything at a glance. And she told me that just the act of seeing all those goals in one place and then being able to check them off each day, it gave her this amazing sense of control.
It's like taking those abstract ideas of being healthier and turning them into concrete actions, and then seeing that visual progress, it just reinforces that sense of accomplishment and motivation.
Exactly. And it's interesting. In the materials we were looking at, there's a story about a college student named Liam, and his experience with habit tracking and using a Listallion journal is so similar to what my sister-in-law was talking about.
It is. Liam was struggling to stay on top of things. He was busy with classes and everything else going on in college life. And he was having a hard time staying consistent with things like drinking enough water, getting enough study time in, and fitting in exercise. But then he started using a Listallion journal, and he specifically tracked those habits. And just that act of tracking them, bringing that visual awareness to his consistency, it made a huge difference. And he also used that journal to reflect on his progress each week. And what he found was that even these small daily actions, they were having a positive ripple effect on his overall well-being and even his time management skills.
It's amazing how even those small habits, when you track them and you make them consistent, they can have such a big impact on other areas of your life. And, one thing I really appreciate about the materials we've been looking at for this episode is that they don't just talk about the why of habit tracking. They also give some really solid, actionable tips. And those tips, they actually align perfectly with using a journal like the Listallion.
Yeah, they do. So the first tip is start small. Don't try to change everything at once. Just pick one or two habits that you want to focus on.
And how can a journal help with that?
Well, because a journal has limited space, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're first starting out. So it kind of naturally forces you to be selective.
Mm.
You're not looking at this overwhelming digital interface with a million options. You have a physical page, and that encourages you to be really intentional about what you choose to track.
Makes sense. Okay, what's the next tip?
The second tip is set clear goals. And we've talked about this a bit already, but writing things down, making them concrete, that's so crucial.
And how does a journal reinforce that?
When you actually dedicate a section of your journal to defining your goals, and then you break those goals down into those trackable habits, it forces you to get specific. You can't just write down be healthier or be more productive. You have to actually define what that looks like for you, what those daily actions are.
I love that. Okay, tip number 3.
Track daily. Make it a routine. And again, this is where a journal really shines because it becomes your dedicated space for that daily tracking. And those dashed lines, they make it so easy to create those daily logs and make them visually appealing. So it's not a chore. It's something you actually enjoy doing.
It's like building that little ritual into your day. And the last tip.
Review progress weekly. Take some time each week to look back at what you've tracked, see what patterns you notice, celebrate your wins, and make any adjustments you need to make.
And the Listallion journal, it's perfectly designed for that, right? With all those pages for your logs and that handy table of contents, so you can easily flip back to previous weeks.
Exactly. You have this amazing historical record of your efforts all in one place. And when you review your progress regularly, it helps you stay motivated and it helps you learn and adapt your approach over time.
It's like you're not just tracking your habits, you're also tracking your own personal growth.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, I want to give this a try, what kind of tangible benefits can they expect to see from consistent habit tracking, especially when they're using a tool like a Listallion journal?
Well, the research on habit tracking, it shows that it can lead to some pretty incredible outcomes. First of all, it can boost your productivity because you're consistently engaging in those actions that are moving you toward your goals. It can improve your mental well-being because you're feeling more in control, you're experiencing that sense of accomplishment. And it can even enhance your self-awareness because as you track your habits and you reflect on your progress, you start to understand yourself better. You start to see those patterns in your behavior, your strengths, your weaknesses.
And for me, it's clear that those Listallion journal features, they actually amplify those benefits. It's like the quality of the materials, that intentional design, it all creates a more positive and engaging experience, and that just makes you want to use it.
Absolutely. It's about creating that environment that supports you, that makes habit tracking feel less like a chore and more like a journey of self-discovery and improvement.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into habit tracking, I think the big takeaway for everyone listening is that this is a powerful tool for anyone who wants to make lasting changes in their life. And a dedicated journal, especially one like the Listallion that we've been talking about, it can be a game changer. It gives you that structure, it encourages you to be consistent, and it makes the whole process more visible and rewarding.
It's about giving yourself the tools and the space to cultivate those positive habits and really unlock your potential.
So for you listening, we'd love for you to think about one small habit that you'd like to start building. Just one. And think about how dedicating a physical space to tracking that habit, using a journal, could change your approach and your results. Maybe explore the Listallion journals. See if they resonate with you. It all starts with that first step and then tracking your journey along the way.